Oh yeah, a little bit of Hardwell. Some good news for the show, so I'm going to turn off my Hardwell here. I actually got like a whole little podcasting, music production setup. You know, it fits like a real condenser mic, and comes with one too. And it has like this little like kind of mini soundboard that I'm all excited to start using. Hopefully I'll have time tomorrow to play with my new toy. Right now, it's we're going to talk about something a little bit different. It's kind of related to The Walking Dead, if you think about it. I'll try to explain that a little later on. It's actually something kind of important to me. It's not just psychology. By the way, I have a BA in psychology, and I've probably read more books on certain specific subjects that interested me than most people with a master's degree in that subject, at least, if not, getting closer to like a doctorate. But of course, I didn't go to graduate school, so I will accept that I'm not the world's expert and that many of my views are kind of projected from my own experience. But that's good because I'm a podcaster, so whatever I experience, I'm sure other people have gone through too. Spraying some biotin in there. Every time I have a cigarette, I get a bit of dry mouth. And in order to stay awake, I kind of need like a constant stream of nicotine, caffeine, both. I hope they come out with some sort of like amphetamine patch. That would be nice. Because I noticed today, and there's a reason psychology is so important to me, is because I grew up out of my mind. I basically came out of the womb looking at the people in the room like they were, mass murderers, and kind of retained that for at least a big chunk of my life before medications. I was basically in like a long panic attack. I had different triggers like heights, for some reason, certain insects, even spiders a little bit, but they'd kind of have to crawl on me, And I think that's kind of just a normal response. Close-ups of insects. I know some of you are going through this, so I'm being like brutally honest and probably kind of telling people way too much information. The CIA is going to like show up with giant pictures of insects and, torture me until I give up something. Thank God I have nothing that they want. Anyway, and by the way, don't think I'm like a schizotypal when I say things like that. I'm just joking. I've had psychiatric difficulties my entire life, and it mostly went untreated. It was always a surprise to me that I could sit there looking like my head was about to explode because I was just terrified for some reason. And people just didn't really notice, or they kind of like shoved me into the background. Even that in itself was kind of terrifying, that you could be going through something that's so emotionally intense, that's so, like that whole like fight or flight response, but on steroids, like you're about to be killed by a tiger, but you're just kind of, having a heart palpitation in your room. And, people would be around you, but they just don't have that kind of empathy. They don't feel that. Right? They don't go, you scared about something? And you could act very kind of weirdly, and they chalk it up to being maybe you're arrogant, maybe you're just very, picky about who you talk to and who you have relationships with. They have all these kind of theories that come out of like, this, the opposite of psychology. Maybe L. Ron Hubbard wrote a book and everybody believes it. I don't know where this stuff came from. Maybe prior to psychology, we were just dumb as shit. I mean, it's looking more and more like that psychology is the only thing that's actually giving us any clue about behavior. And any kind of clue about, what other people are going through. And before that, we were just kind of assholes. We had this whole, a long line of assholes. What's your name, sir? Major asshole. So we have quite possibly the ass end of completely uninformed, retarded, and I mean that, I don't mean that to be mean. I mean that, that there's an actual meaning to the word retarded. I hope everyone's aware of that. I'm not just like kind of using it as a put down. I'm using it as, you can be emotionally or socially retarded. You're held back. So I did want to use it in that sense. I'm reclaiming the word. I'm not calling like a specific person that. I'm saying that as a society, we really lost our fucking mind. And it makes me wonder who the crazy people are. The people who don't fit into society or the people that do. Now, people are differently abled, so I'll allow for this kind of, some people are hunters, some people are gatherers, some people are left-brained, some people are right-brained. There's all these differences. There's 7 intelligences, according to some psychologists and IQ studiers. There's your basic intelligence quotient, which is more of a measure of performance. And then you have these different like social, emotional, like intelligences. And I agree with that. I can see that. Because there are some things that some people are better at. And it kind of has to be kind of put into a different type of intelligence. I don't think that's just kind of like wishy-washy new age stuff. I think that's, it was not just 1 or 2 psychologists. That's a paradigm a lot of people follow nowadays because it makes a bit of sense. So what's going on? And this is, a big part of my show is trying to get a little deeper into that. Now, of course, I accept I'll probably be projecting from my own experience. This is psychology, after all. So the whole thing about human behavior, it's going to go there. You're going to project. They teach all therapists that to kind of recognize their projection, but to never really expect themselves not to. They could minimize it, but they can't get rid of it. So the trick is to recognize it, apologize for it, kind of throw it out, and move on. So it's not something I'm going to claim that I am beyond, because I don't think even the therapists are beyond it. Even therapists have been doing it for a very long time. They're just trained to recognize it and to minimize its effects. So what's really going on? Now, I was kind of a neglected kid. I had a single parent, but I also had kind of a mentally ill single parent that had several different problems. And there were things he loved to do, but I couldn't see him. He was kind of hedged in. He got an IQ test when he was, I think, sometime in high school. And, they had all those things back then in like the 50s. I think he was born in 33, so it would have been like 1950. And he was tested. A lot of this stuff was kind of coming into vogue at that time. And they said that you should be either a social worker or a teacher, or go into the cloth, like my grandfather ended up doing. At the time, he was a physics professor, and then he went in to become a Unitarian minister. He actually went to Harvard Divinity after this, long illustrious career as a applied physicist and then a professor. And I think near the end, he was the director of natural sciences at the Smithsonian. So, there's some intelligence in my family. I don't know what happened to me, but hey. So my father, who always compared himself to the, his super father, my grandfather, who was obviously pretty brilliant. He was tested, and they told him, you're kind of stupid. They weren't very politically correct back then. You really need an easy job. You need kind of a woman's job, because you have trouble thinking, They didn't have like ADHD as a definition yet. There were no DSMs, I don't think, in the 50s. I'm not even sure when the first one came out, but I'm pretty sure it was post 1950. And so he didn't get help that he needed. He just got kind of, hedged into, okay, do a woman's job. Okay. So my father was always kind of emasculated by that. It's one thing to say do an easy job. It's another thing to say do a woman's job. You're not really a man. You're kind of implying that when you do that. Again, not the most politically correct generation that we've gone through. So he was kind of hedged in, and he had these lasting effects from that. And that's what kind of hinted me off to not just him and me and other people in my family, because we're obviously a bit dysfunctional, but to there being more of a society-wide dysfunction. And I kind of get the complexity of it and why people would just not even know that it's a problem that needs to be fixed. And part of that problem is the just lack of parenting. Kids used to go to school and come home, and the parents were, on the farm, and then they, help out on the farm and stuff like that. And the whole homestead idea was very kind of humanistic. They'd have somebody keeping track of them at school. They'd have siblings. They'd have, fellow people in the classroom, fellow students. They'd have kind of a social world. On the way home, they'd, maybe talk to older students, or, they'd have relationships with people and adults, and that was allowed. Now it's like, oh, you can't talk to strangers or they're going to rape you. So you would have these influences from these different people. And I keep thinking about like Little House on the Prairie with Laura Ingalls, and how she would know some people in the, that her parents didn't know and stuff like that, and how she had kind of her own life just by having these influences from other people. Right now, we don't have those influences, and the closest we have is kind of movies. Is the kind of the mass media thing where and that's like a fantasy. That's like the stuff that it might be great. A lot of people love Frankenstein and stuff like that, but it doesn't replace community. It doesn't replace people telling you what's going on, or people giving you different points of views. It doesn't replace being open to that. It's just kind of mind-numbing entertainment, and it's fun. I love movies. I love TV shows like The Walking Dead and stuff like that. And I'll get into why like The Walking Dead is indicative of some of this stuff. So we have this, by the way, the zombie genre in general is indicative of something I'm going to talk about later. But we have all these kind of, what's a way to put it? We have these kind of under the radar issues that are happening, and we're not going to know until things go really, really wrong with it. And I have the feeling that things are being caused by some of these issues, like nightclub shootings and stuff like that, like this kind of undercurrent of really bad mental health. And I'm talking about a society that just doesn't fit a lot of its citizens. Not that these people are necessarily completely out of their gourd, but they may have issues, and then those issues are amplified by a society that doesn't, give them what they need, or give children what they need in general. You don't have the influences of other adults. They're very limited in the as children to the kind of interactions they're allowed to have, and they almost get pushed into a fantasy world where like the only interaction they have is either with fellow students who are just as lost because they're not allowed to like know older students and stuff like that, because they're going to abuse you or rape you, all right, and or they even with their classmates, it's like a play date as opposed to me. I remember as a kid, I would just have people come over my house because they knew where I lived, and they'd say hi. People were allowed to kind of, just walk over to their neighbor's house, I mean, not when they're 4, but, when you're like a teenager or like a preteen, that wasn't a big deal. If you lived in a reasonably safe neighborhood, what's the big deal, right? Well, evidently it was a big deal because people in New York thought they had the thought that maybe they're not bulletproof and they shouldn't leave the house. So it became kind of a very antisocial area, even in the suburbs, where you'd have more of a very safe atmosphere. But it would bleed through because, we were always afraid somebody was to come in from one of the bad neighborhoods. And we did actually have some really bad projects only 10 blocks away. So, people had these fears and they were afraid their kids would meet up with the kind of future gang member kids. So we kind of had a whole generation that was kind of locked in its house. I also remember I would hardly remember where I lived because I would spend so much time in the park with my friends playing all sorts of sports. And we would go to their house, and late at night, I'd kind of, stumble home. And, this was I think from fourth grade. I was 9 or 10. I was kind of walking the streets of a, very good neighborhood, though. I'm not talking about, I'm not trying to virtue signal that I came from the hood. I lived in Fresh Meadows, for Christ's sake. So I would, walk home, and that was, I didn't see many people on the road. I didn't see many kids. They're all kind of locked up in their little concrete boxes. And there wasn't much community. And it was funny because my older brothers seemed to know people in the neighborhood. They seemed to know, people they went to school with and where they lived and that kind of stuff. But by the time my generation came around, it seemed like everybody just wanted to lock their kids in a lead cubicle and, stick them in front of some sort of device. And, of course, in my generation, it was just like the TV and VCR. Oh, how the times have changed. Now we have iPads and we have computers everywhere, and it's kind of the first thing you learn to use is an iPad. They make them specifically with certain programs so that kids can use them. They have some of the kids who aren't exactly up to the iPad yet. They can get all sorts of different tablets that can help those parents raise their kids digitally. You might as well at some point just start sending them emails, because that's the only interaction. Or you can get really parental and actually text them and text back more in real time. Oof. You'd be a superstar these days to do that. And the thing is, though, we're so pushed so hard not to raise our kids. I chose not to have them because I kind of saw the tea leaves and what kind of parent I would be. And what kind of generation I was in and what kind of situation I was in. And I said, you know what? This would be a very bad thing to do to a young person. So maybe I'll wait until I'm more stable, or maybe until I get some hints that I could, raise them responsibly, and to raise them the way I think that children should be raised, with parents around. I'm not going back into traditionalism where, the wife has to be at home, and just in the kitchen popping out babies. And that, the husband has to go to the factory and all that stuff. I'm not saying that that's the only way to do it. There's homesteading, homeschooling. There's also, what about the husband staying home? Didn't we grow up with some shows like that where the husband was like a psychologist and he was home all the time and the wife went out and she was a high-powered lawyer or something? I mean, that can work out. And I think a lot of hubbies would like to stay home and kind of take care of the homestead. They're usually a bit handier and a little bit better at fixing the plumbing. That's a sweeping generalization, but I'm talking about handy guys, not just men in general, they're genetically better at plumbing. I'm just saying that, those handy guys, maybe they'll be good at taking care of the house, I know a lot of wives kind of, who stay at home, they've kind of gotten better at that, kind of taking care of things like that because, it's easier than paying all sorts of money. So somebody could turn a wrench and go $200, please. So we have these kind of unparented generations. And it always hits kind of the poorest people first, because when people have money, they try to retain some of their culture. They try to retain some of, what they perceive as what the rich people do. But when they have nothing, or they're, on public assistance, all that goes out the window. Your birthday party turns into like a candle and an Entenmann's, And when you don't have like the community around that can kind of chip in and say, hey, let's have a birthday party for, Dave's kid, and let's all, we'll make him some gifts because we're kind of poor. But we'll just, keep him company. Somebody will make a cake. Somebody will take care of the candles. No, parents are just on their own. There's no sense of community, unfortunately. Especially in the urban areas, there's really no sense of that. Everybody's kind of like on top of each other, but separately. On top of each other, but on their own. And it's sad, because we could have become something else. But we chose this. And we are at a point where it's not even a choice anymore. We're so confused. We're so far from what families used to be, that we probably don't even know how to get back to that. Now, like I said before, there are plenty of men who would love to learn how to like sew and do things like that are very domestically oriented. And I see no problem with that. That's like the homestead caretaker. That's pretty awesome, actually. And I'm sure they'd love to know how to bend a sock and, how to use, the different stitches on a sewing machine so they could fix their kids' clothes and stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be, women have to return to their role. That's just not, that's not what I'm saying at all. And I don't think we really want to go that route. That seems regressive, not progressive. But we have to take care of our kids to some extent. If both parents can kind of work from home, and hopefully that trend will continue, where people can kind of telecommute and make a good living at it. I know an editor who does that, and I feel happy for his kids when he starts having some, because they're gonna have daddy around, and that's important. It's important. I know we kind of talk about, but sons need their mother, and little girls need daddy. So what about the girls? It's just the stability of it, just to have somebody there, have somebody looking out for you, have somebody kind of creating a safe space, because we're making safe spaces in college, which isn't even what the safe spaces were all about. They actually started to protect homosexuals from getting kind of found out and outed and beaten up and set on fire. But I think it's transformed into this kind of this place where they can feel safe because they feel so unsafe. They're not coming from a foundation. And I know a lot of the people on the right call them snowflakes and stuff like that, but look at what's going on societally. If both parents are out working, no one's really allowed to stay home yet. Hopefully that'll change, like I said, and to at least be that kind of rock of Gibraltar that the kids look forward to seeing after school, and they have some sort of discipline. They have some sort of chores that they're made to do, so they get used to doing things that they don't want to do. There's all these effects from just having a parent there. And of course, then when the other parent gets home, just to spend some time with them, not have jobs that are so demanding that we kind of look at our kids as like a curse. Shit, why the fuck did I have kids? And yeah, you love them, but when you're so pushed and pushed and pushed, and you're told that to be a success that you have to kind of kill yourself, you get to a point where you're looking at your kids like they're just a detriment to your life. Like, I'm supposed to have these kids. I know I'm supposed to. That's what everybody told me. But God damn it, I wish I didn't. And that comes out. That comes out when you're thinking that way. Kids know when they get very hyper vigilant when they feel those kind of emotions coming off of their parents. And we call them narcissistic parents, or we call them narcissistic dynamics or narcissistic families, where you have to kind of keep an eye on the emotions of the parent as opposed to the parent keeping an eye on the emotions of the kid and helping them deal and helping them grow and helping them grow up. But I think that we also use narcissism in kind of relationships, like traditional relationships. So we've kind of skewed the definition to be kind of the bad guy, like the narcissist is just like evil. And that's not necessarily true. Like I said, you work 20 hours a day, you get home and the kids are like, pulling on your skirt or your work pants, and now you're resenting them. And it's only natural. So we need to think of ways to make this whole deal a little easier so that we don't just raise a bunch of hellions, who are twitching in a corner from feeling unsafe, or they become the opposite. They become very aggressive and stuff, again, to feel safe, like they're protecting themselves, because they feel like they're on their own, and the only way they could do it is kind of Lord of the Flies, so instead of being one of the kids that gets picked on, they'd rather pick on other kids. And then we get a bullying problem. Wow, that's funny how that kind of happened. So we raise our kids with iPads instead of with parenting. We show them that all you do is work, that you're not allowed to really have any family time or any time with friends or anything like that. And even time with friends becomes like, oh man, we got to have a good time. We got to have a good time. Not, oh, this is fun. I like doing this. No, it's like you got to have a good time. You only have 20 minutes to do it. You got to, we got to schedule a play date, and there's going to be activities, and we're going to plan out the activities, and you're going to do the activities. Whatever happened just kind of shooting the shit with your buddy? Or maybe they had a pool table in the basement or something, and, some sort of man cave, and you just kind of hung out and, acted like friends. We're kind of roboticizing ourselves. I mean, there's always these movies about like the robots taking over. They kind of have. And talking about that, the zombies taking over, or, like wiping out the earth. I get the feeling, this whole zombie motif, and I love it, I enjoy it. But we're starting to get into this kind of, it's too late. No matter what we do, it's just all going to fall apart and everyone's going to die. It's like this very nihilistic, very negative kind of view of the world that, having parents might have helped you not have, feeling kind of safe, or at least you had some people that you could depend on that could, you felt like they would back you up. But now it's like society is bigger than them. If society is going to go at you, then you're fucked. It doesn't matter, your parents can't protect you. Your parents can't help you out. Your parents can't teach you how to do anything. They're just as fucked as you are. They're in the same kind of situation. And so everyone's just kind of screwed. And whatever happens, happens. We have no control over it. It's not our society anymore. It's been, the establishment people or whoever, or whatever conspiracy theory you want, with like CIA and some sort of deep state. They're in charge and they don't give a shit. And I don't think they know. Let's say there were some kind of sort of like deep state people who are like planning out society. They probably don't realize that like your kid's being raised by a nanny that doesn't speak English. It probably isn't a way to get a good connection with them, and they're going to despise you. So all these people who are supposedly in charge, and I really hope they don't have kids. Let them not breed. Let them kind of leave that to us, because they're going to have absolute psychopaths. and they probably already are kind of psychopathic. So those are the people that are attracted to power. So now you have them making some kid who has pretty shitty genes to begin with, and they're making them even worse. It's a wonder that most kids don't grow up killing animals like some future mass murderer at this point. At least that with that they would feel some sort of sense of power or something. And okay, I'm not supporting killing animals. I'm a big fluffy bunny person. Like those brown bunnies with like the floppy ears. I've never had one, but I like to go to the pet store, and when they have one of those, I'm like kind of a weirdo with it. I love fuzzy things, little furry animals. So like I said, I'm a bit of a tree hugger, a bit of a hippie, a bit of a liberal. And I don't see anything wrong with that, as long as everyone's kind of being honest about who they are. All is good. I don't think you have to be worry too much about that, because society is in such fucking disarray. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Call you, let's say you like bunnies and you like furry animals. What are they going to call you? Too effeminate at this point? We have kids, 13-year-old boys wearing like lipstick and earrings and shit, and claiming they're gender fluid, not transsexual, gender fluid, and they just kind of like that shit, and they like to play with dolls and whatever, and that's all good. So I think my me liking animals just makes me kind of a decent human being. Our society is in disarray. There is a sort of Lord of the Flies thing going on. Thankfully, a bit less violent, at least in the middle class and what's left of it. But it's no wonder that when you go to the lower socioeconomic neighborhoods, it's more like Lord of the Flies, and it's getting more and more violent. No matter the people that hate Trump, they love to say that, oh no, these cities aren't getting more violent. That's all kind of Trump's brainwashing, all his alternate facts. No, we kind of know for a fact that I think 5 cities I've heard mentioned lately, could be 4. I know it's like Baltimore, Chicago, Detroit, and one other one. But New York and LA are actually, they do have lowering crime rates, or at least they're stable and not so high, because they have huge police forces that are, doing their job, evidently. Other cities, not doing their job so much. So is it Detroit, Chicago, Baltimore? I can't remember the other one. But it wasn't like, it wasn't New York and LA, obviously. So we kind of have these Lord of the Fly neighborhoods. And we even have a little bit of what Europe gets, where you have ethnic neighborhoods the cops won't go into. And I never heard of this. When I was growing up, I never heard of, there's a Sharia neighborhood in somewhere in Pennsylvania, and the cops, they've given up on it, and they just let the Sharia people do what they want. I've never heard of this. This wasn't a liberal value. In fact, if anything, we were kind of fighting the whole Sharia law thing existing. That they would do these horrible things to people and have these horrible, like, theocratic rules was kind of against what being an American was about. And now everything's just so freaking up in the air. It's no wonder that we have male suicide rates that are kind of making records here. We have rates of mental illness that are becoming quite surprising. And we just have people not making it. They don't know how. They had no support. They didn't have parents. They didn't have, any adults in the neighborhood. They didn't have a community, really. They're just kind of on their own and kind of floating in the ether, maybe tethered to society, like a tetherball. Remember that, like, little tennis ball on a string? You probably don't even know what that is, because that was kids who had parents. Parents would get them like a tetherball on a pole, and they kind of almost play tennis back and forth with themselves. I mean, the only way you'd know that is if, the Nintendo had a tetherball game, right? Like most people wouldn't even know that exists. There weren't things in physical reality for a lot of these kids growing up. They were just in a box in front of a screen. And I mentioned this a couple shows ago. It's kind of our fault. While we were sitting there complaining about Reagan, we didn't really know what we were complaining about. We would say things like, oh, he's strengthening the military, but like one B-1 bomber costs as much as this and that. And you have Ross Perot get up with, he had like these ears that could like grab rolls off of tables like they were so huge and Dumbo-ish. Oh, the cartoons on him were awesome. And you had almost like a generation, starting with mine at least, if not before. I know the late 70s had some problems too. I'll tell you why I know that. But we had people just kind of giving up and saying, I don't fucking know anymore. I don't know how to solve this. I have some kind of loose idea that we could, replace welfare with like a negative income tax or something like that. And nobody followed any of the decent ideas. I'm not saying that that's like the best idea. I don't even really understand it. But nobody really followed any of it. It just kind of just kept getting shittier and shittier and more convoluted and complex. And the only thing that the lawyers in charge could do, as far as our politicians, would add more rules to more rules to more rules. And it would just kind of get so convoluted and complicated that people were just like giving up. But what the fuck? I don't know what the hell this is. I don't know how to like start a business now. And hats off to people that did. Unfortunately, that tended to be kind of the Trump crowd that already had lots of money. So it wasn't as much of a risk to them. Because I got to tell you, if you kind of take business courses and hop into kind of running a business, it is overwhelming. It is overwhelmingly complex. You have to have all these different accounts for taxes, for county, city, state, federal. You have to, you got to do the whole like state and federal tax return. That's not so bad. You usually have 2 of those anyway. So adding another 2 to that, not so bad if you're kind of like a one-man businessman. But God, paying your employees and understanding all the rules and that, and human resources that you have to have, and like all these compliance regulations, and it's quite overwhelming. I can see why a lot of people were like, "Hey, this is the country you could come to and start a business," and a lot of people are like, "Yeah, but that's pretty fucking hard." Maybe it's by design, to kind of keep people from starting businesses so that they don't want small business competition that could undercut them in some way. Like I said, if you're living in a tenement with 3 people and you share a bathroom and your rent is like, much lower, suddenly you kind of have an advantage against a bigger business. So that corporate plumbing thing that has taken all the private plumbers and hired them, you might be just as good of a plumber, but now you need all sorts of licenses and all sorts of complicated business structures, and it's deregulation. I remember seeing The View today. This is kind of another way that we've gone wrong. I'm watching The View because my mother puts it on, and she doesn't realize I hate it because she doesn't, get those cues. She's older, she can't see, she can't really hear, so, she has kind of diminished capacity, and her capacity wasn't that great to begin with. So she's very good at ignoring other people's emotional states. That's her cross to bear. She had some issues in childhood. But anyway, I'm watching The View, and, these women get vehemently stupid and say just the most ridiculous things if you know what the hell's going on, or you just know a little bit of it. It's kind of, oh my God, I can't believe they're allowed to speak. And they usually have like 1 or 2 kind of quasi-conservative people on who will say, well, what Trump did wrong was really this. They'll kind of qualify it so they're, not just saying you're an asshole, Whoopi, or Joy, or whoever is on the left side, when it's like all left, really, and then there's one kind of pseudo right. So it's not really balanced. It's really hard to watch for anybody who's actually paid attention to anything ever. I'm trying to remember what they went into that was just so kind of heinous. As usual, they were, getting on Trump about something, and him being a liar and a cheat and the Antichrist and a Nazi and all this crap. I forget, there was kind of a current event that they went to. He was talking about Sweden. Now I've already seen like a dozen YouTube videos that kind of explain what he really meant. He saw some show on Fox News that was talking about the crime rate in Sweden. And they have one guy in Sweden who did a YouTube video who's actually in Sweden. And he's a Bosnian immigrant, the Angry Foreigner, I think he's called. And he was going into how the crime over there is absolutely ridiculous, and how the liberals over there are just, are hiding it, or they're doing all whole sorts of spin jobs in order to keep people from knowing what's really going on, even within the country, and that there's kind of this huge movement in the country to control immigration at this point, because people are waking up and saying, hey, they're raping people, that rape not good, I thought. It's kind of weird that we live in societies that, we actually have to kind of look at who's in charge and go, wasn't rape not good? Like we can't figure that out for ourselves, that, raping people is wrong. So, do we have to be told by somebody who's, the better liberal, I guess, or, the more up top liberal that, raping is wrong? Because we're not allowed to have opinions anymore, because evidently when no one raises you, you get raised by the state. And when you get raised by the state and the society as a whole, you look to it to be your parent, because you didn't have one. So now you have these people who have this amazing power. I mean, think about that. Am I allowed to hate rape? Like, how dehumanized do you have to get where you give up your right to be angry at rape because it serves some greater purpose? What the fuck kind of thinking is that? And then I don't think the people who are kind of saying, oh, well, it's not all Muslims and all that stuff, I don't think they're getting the point, because I don't think they're adults either. So you have kind of, like I said, it's Lord of the Flies without the sticks and the knives, the sharpened stone knives or whatever. It's more civilized when we get to this like sort of middle class that has a lot through no real work of its own. Just, you're middle class, you get to kind of stay there. If you're lucky. So the kind of remaining middle class that ends up being kind of more wealthy, and a percentage of them go into power somehow via, I guess, law school usually. And they seem like kids that are like looking for someone to tell them what to think, looking for someone to go, oh yeah, rape is bad now. Yeah, rape is bad now. Or rape isn't bad now. No. We like rape now. And I don't get that. And maybe it's me. Maybe I'm a simple person. Maybe I'm just a person. And I can't fathom that we would ever kind of accept, these kind of activities, these kind of crimes against people. I just can't fathom it. I guess I'm a dinosaur. Well, this dinosaur is eventually going to have to stop talking because I'm running out of mouth spray to keep my mouth from getting like super dry and all that. So, good night, everybody. Good luck. Hope to speak to you soon.